Hello, welcome to my cake kitchen. If we're meeting for the first time, hello there, I am Gladys, and over here I make simple, informative tutorials to help you navigate cake decorating easily. Normally these lives are at 1 p.m. UK time. I know we're running a little bit late, but it's great to have your company. I hope you're well. What are we doing today? Well, we're just catching up on some of the cakes we made this week. I'm also going to be packaging some brownies and just handing you some tips. Our last video here yesterday, which was about testing for sugar, I'll be talking you through some of the results of that when the live chat picks up. Hi Lollipop, good afternoon. I told you I had a meeting today, so a little part of me nearly didn't make it, but I thought, let me try and keep my word and show up to work, okay? Even though I don't have the threat of being fired. I hope you're all well though. So what have I been doing? My kitchen seems a little bit dark today. Where is Tabitha? Well, I told you last night I was going to be baking, okay? And if you don't know what we're talking about, we have a tradition over here where I keep breaking my teacups, okay? If you're catching me on replay, this is one of the chatty videos, but whilst we're at it, let me just show you the brownies that I made last night. Yeah, I baked these brownies last night. These are going to be I'm gonna make a video on them so that you can have the recipe. But boy, these brownies are good. Look at how, why do I keep doing this to you guys though? I keep coming back and showing you things that I've done. But I think I do that just to give you a look into the things that are not here. Good dear. Right, look at those brownies. I'm going to pick one up and I'm going to show it to the camera. Look at that dense brownie, okay? It is so good. It is fudgy. I haven't had brownies so good. And I'm not a brownie girl. I don't like brownies that much. I find the chocolate so intense. I find them heavy. But boy, I'm actually going to pick this recipe and I'm going to adapt it to suit my own palate, because the chocolate, the cocoa, the chocolate that I used cocoa powder and chocolate bars, and the chocolate was about 74% cocoa, okay? So it's intense, it's heavy, but look at that. I mean, you can't really be mad at this, okay? So there's for a friend's daughter whose birthday there was. They're chocolate brownies, my lovely. The one asking, is it? Look, they're chocolate brownies. And you know what? Normally I have struggled with brownies and the way they bake. Sometimes they're bent on the side. These brownies just turned up just amazing. I don't feel like I want to eat brownies, but I'm tempted to have a bite. Okay, let's Matthew, good morning. How are you, darling? Right, yeah, let's go package the brownies. These are for a friend's daughter, so I am not going to do anything fancy about them. I'm just going to put them in a simple box. These are not the boxes. These are like gift boxes that I use for friends and family when I have to give stuff away. So these come in flat pack. These come in flat packs. So all I'm doing is I've already prepped one. Where is it? Yeah, I've already prepped one here. I think there are going to be about 8 brownies or 10 of those in total to take away. And yeah, the flat pack, they are not very secure. So what did I do? Oh, I didn't bring, bear with me, I'm just picking up something quickly, but you can have a look at the brownies. There you go. And by the way, the cake's behind me. We're going to talk about that in a moment, okay? So we're packaging. Who's asking, what's the occasion or just to be sweet? Well, it's my a very good friend's daughter's birthday, and she doesn't want a cake. She just wants some brownies. So I just thought I'll treat her to some brownies from scratch, homemade by Auntie. That's all. That's the occasion for the brownies. But if you're just joining us, hello there. We are serious. We're a serious baking channel. Except if you were here yesterday, you will know that I haven't been very well. So I am just trying to catch a breather, whilst also trying to give you some value. Somebody says I look like dear mom, right? I guess that's a good thing, isn't it? Okay. No one has told me that before, but yeah, that's nice. Thank you. Right, there you go. So the boxes, we have 2 boxes all done, and I'm gonna get myself some parchment paper, and for the parchment paper we're going to roll this over, and then I'm going to cut that into 2. Yeah, Tapeta must be sleeping today, but it's okay. She's okay. I hope she's well though. That is what matters, right? And I think baking these brownies has got me feeling, oh, can I go back to having a market store? I used to have a market store, and it was fun until it wasn't, right? Can you imagine? Would you buy these brownies? Don't answer that. Okay, so there we have it. I'm just, yeah, we have. Okay. That's one set here. You know what? Lollipop. Having a market stall is fun, but it's a lot of work. Ooh. It is too much work, and I'm terrified. I'm terrified. Ooh. When I had it, oh, the joy of doing something on my own was so much fun, but the amount of work that went into getting fresh bakes, oh God, I really can't. The idea of it is even more terrifying now. So yeah. Okay. Right. What's happened there? Right. Right. Okay. And there you go. I'll package them and seal them properly, but yeah, there you are. So having an auntie who bakes all the time is a good thing, isn't it? Sunshine, love. Sunshine, thank you. You too, Sunshine. I hope you're having a good day. Now, I've left myself a couple of brownies here. I'm complaining about the brownies, yeah? But I still want to eat a brownie. Let's see. Look at that brownie. Janet, thank you. These brownies, honey. If you've been on this channel, the silence tells a lot. Okay? The only person I'm thinking of right now is Lollipop. Lollipop, we could be eating these brownies together. I'm sorry, darling. They're good. And that's all I'm saying. That aside, let's revisit our cake from yesterday. We made this cake. You know what? I could as well. I could actually. Lollipop, I'll see you. Right? We made this cake yesterday. And this is what surprises me. First of all, the glaze has set on the cake. And it actually looks like polished leather. Look at it. That is a cake. Okay? Now the problem is I want to cut this cake, but I also want to hold it. Okay? So let me just I'm tired, people. I want to kind of hawk my cake. When I get over myself, I'll bring it back and then we can cut it. Can't wait. Okay? Thank you, Katie. Thank you. Yeah, it is so fancy and cute. That was the whole intention. Thank you. I know. I don't. But yeah, we made it. Okay? I just wanted to show you what it looks like 24 hours after we made it. It looks so polished. It just, I want to lift it now. But if I did it, I'll break the handle. Okay? So there we have it. A question for you. I know I made this, but I also made the bag with the sole intention of inspiring you to undertake your own handbag cake. So here's a question for you in the chat. Do you feel that the tips that were handed and the entire process is beginner friendly enough for you to undertake this bag cake on your own? If it's a yes, leave one hand in the chat, and if it's a no, leave two hands in the chat, just so that I have some idea about what we can do next and how to simplify the process for you as well. Thank you. Yeah, I think I am Lollipop. I'm actually hoping that I can do that sometime in the future. So so that it's like realistic. So yeah, I think the thing that informs me a lot of the time, is who my target audience is. Because if, despite trying to make it beginner friendly, I also come with a certain level of skill. So I almost think about the beginner in a way that if this is your very first cake you're going to make, you're going to worry about a few other things and be anxious about some other things that may untoward, that may be slightly different. So I really do not want to make it complicated. That's one thing. But as it develops, you will see me undertake some more complex cakes, because the entire reason is also to bring you along the journey and to show you what is possible. So yeah, that would be great. But whilst you're there, those of you in the chat, right, one thing I'll ask of you, do consider liking the video, and yeah, support the channel, and maybe, just maybe, subscribe too if you haven't already. What are you doing? So that is brownie packaging and the handbag cake. Now let's move on to other things. Yesterday I was here. I told you I was baking a lot of cake for research. Look, all these cakes. If you wonder where these cakes are going, I am wondering that myself. I'm like, where are all of these cakes going? Right. Now, people, when I tell you my life is all about cakes, do you believe me now? When I tell you, at midnight last night, I was still baking these brownies. And so here we are. Okay, there we are. Right. So let's talk sugar in cake making. The immediate subject is that yesterday, in our last video, if you've been here, in our last video, I undertook a bake where I was baking some cakes for research. And the research was, what does it look like if we decided to reduce our sugar? That is all part of our developing series, the functions of sugar in baking. And I've already said the subject of sugar is very wide ranging, depending on what you're baking, depending on the recipe you're using, depending on the technique or method you're using to make the cake. But the simple question I was attempting to answer was, how does sugar affect baking, right? How? And whilst that is just a generic question, there are sub questions under that. Because can you wake up one day, pick up a recipe and decide to increase the sugar? Or can you reduce the sugar? And what does it look like if you bake without sugar? And I narrowed down my research to baking cakes, because that is what I primarily do. I'm a cake maker. So it kind of makes sense to center my intention around the thing that I am doing the most, because over here you will find recipes, you will find subject matter about cake decorating and all things cake. So if you're asking a simple question, why didn't I pick anything else like cookie? I could use the cookie or a muffin to demonstrate the point. However, that's not what I primarily do. So it kind of makes sense to stick to the thing that I primarily do. So what I did was, I'll talk you through what my whole purpose was. What I did was to be able to at least get a fair answer to that question, how sugar impacts baking. I had to look at the various ways that cakes are derived. The ultimate thing is that cake is not derived by one method. There are different methods. But if you categorize the different methods, they come under certain labels, if you like. So for instance, you can make a cake by creaming the butter and sugar together, okay? And that is one specific method of cake making, cake batter making, right? And then you can also make the cake by putting all the ingredients together and then mixing them without having to cream the butter and sugar. And mind you, when we talk about creaming, we have the traditional sugar and butter creaming, and we have the butter and flour creaming, which is what is known as the reverse creaming. Now we're getting into the weeds about the science of baking. The point is, I'm just keeping a shallow view here to give you some basic understanding of the intention that got us here. So we have the creamy method, we have the all-in-one method, and we have the foam method. These are like the basic summary of the three methods of cake making. You'll find that all the cakes that you will find on the market, from your angel food cake, pound cake, your basic sponge, Genoese, and all the different types of cakes fall somewhere under these categories, right? Now, the subject of the types of cakes will be discussed later in the series as it develops. So whilst we're at it, do consider subscribing, join us here. But on the subject again, right, so I picked the creamy method, which was one. And then I picked the all-in-one method, which was another method. And then I got the foamy method, covering all the three methods of cake making. And then I thought to myself, if I find a specific recipe that works, and then I begin to tinker with the sugar or make changes to the sugar, what does it look like? And it wasn't long. I'm not even halfway through the research, and I think I've gotten part of the answers that I wanted. And it goes back to the functions of sugar. Just in case you don't know what I'm talking about in terms of the functions of sugar, I have already made a video about it. And if you're a beginner who wants to understand the role that sugar plays in baking, please go check that video out. Bear with me. If you're a beginner, oh God, yeah. If you're a beginner who doesn't know the functions of sugar in baking, maybe go check that video out, because that will give you an idea about what sugar does. Generally, the functions of sugar starts from being a sweetener, and depending on what type of sugar you're using, because actually, I think I'll show you. At the moment, this is my obsession. I know, I'm crazy. RD, hi there, darling. How are you? Look, at the moment, this is my obsession, okay? When I'm talking sugar, I'm not just talking sugar, okay? We don't do things by house here. We buy sugar, we use sugar, I talk sugar, I bake with sugar. Look, my life is sweetened by sugar. Hi, RD, good day, my darling. And Dila, you're speaking in a language I can't read, darling. Okay, try and make it into English so I can read. But yeah, sugar, can I tell you, there are different types of sugar, okay? So depending on what type of sugar you are using, all these, including, look, I even found fake sugar, people. I even found fake sugar. Look, there is Demerara sugar. There is dark muscovado. There is light muscovado. Look, these people are spending our money, but it's for good reason, because all this sugar, right, generally they perform the same functions, but they yield different results depending on the type of sugar. And surprisingly, I found that plain white sugar actually has like what you would otherwise say it's bland. Okay, white sugar has no flavor to it. It's crisp and bland, That's why sugar. It's sweet. I never thought there would be sweet can be termed as bland, but there's context. The context is that if you use plain white sugar, it is going to taste or feel different compared to, say, if you're using brown sugar, light brown sugar, and all that sort. We will, yeah, this is my sugar collection. That is quite a collection, and I'm not done. So the subject of sugar in baking is going to be a developing series. When I tell you, look, I live for you people. Like, I live for actually bringing you the information. I mean, there is caster sugar. This stuff is expensive, you know. But that is just by the way, people. It's fine. Look. So, I brought the sugar out to illustrate a point, which is to say, depending on what type of sugar you use, your results are going to be slightly different. But on a generalized scale, sugar performs the same functions in baking. Sugar adds sweetness. I wonder what it will look like if you baked without sugar. Well, we will find out later down the series what it looks like when we bake without sugar, right? Or when we reduce the sugar. Sugar tenderizes. And I think the core goal of undertaking all of this was for myself to be able to understand visually what sugar tenderizes mean. Because here's a question for you in the chat, okay? When I say sugar tenderizes, do you know what that means? Right, let me just, me and my sugar collection. Sugar collection. Well, let me get the sugar collection out of the way. Okay. Right. When I say sugar tenderizes, do you know what it means? There is a fly here that is in my ear. Right? People in the chat, I need your attention here. I said, when I say sugar tenderizes, can you explain what that means in the chat for me, please? You know when you get the hissing of a fly, it is annoying. I'm gonna... Okay. Yeah. I don't like the sound of flies and the summer is here. Okay. Aldi says, that's an interesting idea. Sugar feeds the yeast in breads, but I don't know about cakes. Thank you. Right. Aldi will talk about sugar and yeast in bread. I'm no bread maker, so that will not be my sort of strength match, but I know it does something to the yeast. I'll explain the what sugar does to cakes in a moment, but just engaging you. If you're in the chat, join the conversation. If I said, we know sugar adds sweetness, right? Because we like sweet things, cakes are sweet. But when I say, so we're in baking class, right? So get your pen and a paper and let's talk about this, because I compiled a video, but I kind of feel like the video was just a general summary of the idea, because I knew that way down the line I was going to be discussing this in detail, and I just thought I'll leave a footprint of the subject matter just so that we can all go to it if necessary. So if you're in the chat, all of you, if you're just catching me for the first time, hello there. I'm Gladys. I love cake. And at the moment, my obsession is cakes, but I also obsess about the ingredients that go into cakes. Because I don't just make amazing cakes like this, even if I say so myself. They have to taste good, okay? And for a cake to taste good, you need to know what goes on into the cake. So at the moment, we are tackling the subject of sugar in cake making. And some of the functions of sugar primarily is to add sweetness, but we also know sugar tenderizes. So if I say sugar tenderizes, what does that mean? And Ardi in the chat says sugar feeds yeast in bread making, but she doesn't know about cakes, right? So for those of you in the chat, what do you think? Sugar tenderizes? Leave your answers in the chat for me so that we can I'm just trying to multitask whilst we're here. Right. Okay, sugar tenderizes. What does tenderize means? Let's not cheat. Tenderize. Tenderize means it makes something a little tender or softer, for want of a better word. So, right. So, the subject, yeah, Lollipop says it softens the flour. Okay. If I took that literally, okay, Lollipop, if I took that literally, if I took flour and added sugar to it, will that soften? No, we're talking, your answer is correct, but what I am looking to do is kind of break down the whole science of it in very simplistic form so that you can have an understanding. And actually, up until I started the research, the whole thing just looked so plain to me, and I couldn't because I'm like, if anybody asked me sugar tenderizes, okay, I've learned it. What does that actually mean in actuality? Like, what is the science behind that? And both of you are correct. Like RD said, and both of you are correct. Oh god, like, this is going to just give me reverb. Okay. Right. So let's say this. When we say sugar tenderizes, you know, when you pick a cake. So this is let me just go in here and pick up the original recipe. This is going to get me to eat more cakes than I need, but hey, I'm taking one for the team. So here is a cake I baked 2 days ago. I used the creaming method. We used butter. I've just taken it out of the fridge, wrapped up. But when you look at it, the crumb, I love my job. When you look at it, the crumb is set. The cake tastes great. You have a tightly soft textured crumb here. It's flavored nicely. It is sweet. The cake itself is moist. It's not dry and crumbly. Now, to get the result of that cake, that is what you call science. It is the combination of the ingredients in proportion and then using a technique that will assist best results. And that's why we have the cake. Now, the role of sugar in actually getting this cake to look like we want it to be is that by tenderizing, depending on what technique we use here, because I'm going to have to keep reminding you, cakes are not made the same way. Sugar functions the same, but through different means. So for instance, if we were making this cake, which I made by creaming the butter and sugar, the first function of sugar outside of sweetening the sugar is that sugar aids leavening, which is that it helps the cake rise. How does that do that? Because the answer we are looking for is in the how, not the idea. So we know sugar helps leavening, but how does it do that? Well, first of all, it helps leavening by digging air pockets into the butter or solid fat. So whether you're using butter or baking spread, the moment I bring my hand mixer or this stand mixer and I start mixing the sugar and the butter together, what I am doing is that I'm digging air pockets. The sugar crystals are creating constant air pockets in the butter, and these air pockets will eventually expand in the oven when I come to baking. including the other ingredients that are added. There's a network of activity happening there, but the simplistic term is that those air pockets will eventually trap gases and also help to expand in the oven, which will aid the rise of the cake. So when I say sugar helps leavening, this is how it does it. So in the same breath, when I say sugar tenderizes, how does it do that? Well, we know that sugar tenderizes by interfering with gluten strands, okay? Because the flour that we use for baking contains gluten. Gluten is activated when the flour is sitting there, the flour is just flour, right? But the moment flour comes into contact with any moisture, and then depending on how you mix it and how the consistency of mixing happens, you're going to develop the gluten. If you stay with that intention, what happens is that sugar as an ingredient has certain properties that will affect this flour and the development of gluten. Sugar has a property that is specifically hygroscopic. And that's a fancy word of saying sugar is so selfish. Sugar comes to your home and sugar is like, anything that has moisture here, I'm going to suck it and I'm going to keep to it. That's what sugar does, okay? So in baking, when sugar is being mixed with the other ingredients, sugar is over here being like, I have all these things to do, but I want all this moisture for myself. So by so doing, when sugar then comes into contact with the flour in the ingredient mixing process, when you're trying to make your batter, scientifically what sugar is doing is that sugar is taking the moisture and hogging onto it, because gluten needs some of that moisture to be able to develop. So the less moisture is available, the less likely you're going to get gluten to develop more. Does that make sense? So Audi, who said sugar feeds the yeast and also affects bread making. Yes, because in bread making, you don't have a lot of sugar. You rely on the gluten being activated for us to have a doughy, chewy texture, but not so much in cake. And one of the key functions of sugar is to make sure that naturally we don't end up with a tough cake. I'll tell you how I know that. Because outside of telling you, yesterday, I attempted to bake a cake using less sugar. The quantity of sugar required, I just halved it. And I thought, what could be wrong? Well, I'll tell you what is wrong. First of all, the cake wasn't very sweet, which isn't the worst thing to happen. If I don't have a sweet cake, tough luck, right? But by the time, this was one of the cakes I baked. By the time I finished creaming the cake and the cake came to bake, when I cut into it, I filmed that part. When I cut into it, the cake seemed like it was lightly textured. By the time it came to set, we have a doughy looking cake here that is very crumbly and dry. One of the functions of sugar is that outside of hogging onto the moisture, it doesn't just hog the moisture because it's selfish. That's just my way of just explaining it. It is also because when it hogs onto the moisture, it keeps your bakes fresher for longer, which is important. But because I reduced the amount of sugar, we have a crumbly textured cake here that looks like if I hadn't wrapped it up and left it on the side uncovered, this morning I would have a very dry biscuit, crackly type of cake. So does sugar play a good role here? Yes, because actually with the recipe and the sugar being great, look at this cake. This cake looks much better. If you're looking at this on screen, there may not be any difference in appearance, but trust me when I tell you, this cake is still lightly textured. But this right here is very doughy. And not very sweet. This one is even worse. This cake right here is very dense. It's not nice. Look at that. It's very doughy. No. So I'm a third of the research in, because what I was trying to do was halve the sugar, double the sugar, and then use no sugar. I don't think I'm going to bother with the sugar, the no sugar, because I think I've got the result I need in half the sugar. Because if this is half the sugar quantity in the cake, and the cake is already looking super dense, bread-like, doughy, not sweet, what's the point? But we'll come to actually raising the sugar twice as much just to see what it would look like. So consider this a sort of there was a question in the chat. I'll be answering your questions in the chat. So consider this a sort of sugar lesson to say it is really important you stick to the recipes and the sugar that is required in the cake. And mind you, I am having to remind you that when you see a recipe is not just numbers and measurements put together. Whoever derived the recipe would have taken time, because look at the amount of cakes I've made here. If I was developing a recipe book for you, this would be the research I'll be doing. I would have to go down into the cakes, make sure that the recipe is correct. And I'm not just doing that to make myself feel better. As a cake maker, right? Understanding the science of baking means that you can troubleshoot, because trust me, things will happen to you. Even if you pick up a recipe online and you're baking, unless all the factors are in your favor, things can happen. Sometimes your oven is not budging. The difference between a conventional oven is going to result slightly differently to a convection fan oven. Do we know the difference between a convection and a conventional oven? There you go. So if you go and you pick a recipe online, and the recipe say, preheat your oven at 160 degrees C, is it specifically stating convection or conventional oven? Because what it says there will determine the outcome of your bakes. For instance, a convection fan oven has a fan at the back of the oven which radiates heat evenly around. A convention oven has static heat which rises, so you're going to have heat, your oven warmer at the top and a little bit less warm below. So for an oven like that, at some point when you're baking, especially if your bake is going to take a long time, you have to stop mid-bake and alternate. That works against don't open your oven. Because what do you mean I shouldn't open my oven when I'm having the top of the oven warmer than the bottom? All of these things are things that you need to understand. So I say all of this to say, this is just a little bit of insight. Consider somebody just put in there a real masterclass. I guess not, because I'm still figuring this stuff out. But I hope the information about the baking ingredients, how they affect things, will inform you so that you can get your best result. Because ultimately, baking is food. Like cakes are like another option of food, dessert, whatever you do. Now, is everybody going to be able to make a cake this pretty? No. Okay? And I would love you to be able to make a beautiful cake. But that shouldn't always be the aim. The aim is to be able to go into your kitchen to put something together that your children will love, your husband will love, your friends and family will enjoy. And that's the whole point here. So in summary, the sugar is important. Baking with less sugar has really, really terrible results to your bake, and I don't encourage it. But I'll be off researching some more, and we'll be talking more about sugar. Now, let me just go into the chat and see. Can I ask a question? Lions, is it Lionza? Is it Lionzia? Look, I've butchered your name, honey, but yes, Lionzia, you can ask me a question. You go ahead. And Ardy, do you think crystallized sugar versus syrup will make a difference? Okay, Crystallized sugar will work differently to syrup. You know why? Universally, sugar has similar functions, as in whether you're using crystallized sugar or you're using syrup, sweetness remains the same. Okay. However, in certain functions, they will function differently. For instance, crystallized syrup is not going to aid leavening for you. You know why? Because it's the components of crystallized sugar that aids leavening is almost unavailable when you have a syrup. So then if you're looking at leavening your cake using sugar, you're going to derive that using a different method. Does that make sense? So sweetness and moisture retention and tenderizing properties may remain static across board for the sugars. It will not be the same for certain functions, like for instance structure building and leavening. Does that make sense? Because for instance, when we're talking leavening and structure building, let's take meringue. That's just a deviation from the subject of cakes, but stick with me. You know, when you're making meringue, you are supposed to add sugar to the meringue so that it whips. What sugar does in that mixing process is that it stabilizes the egg white foam so that it gives it structure and also traps in air pockets, which will help the meringue keep its form and bake. Similar principle to when we are making a cake using the foam method, because remember I said not all cakes are made the same. They don't use the same method. So for instance, if I was making, let's say, the Genoese sponge that relies specifically on the foam and the air to rise instead of rising agent, or the creamy method, which is mechanical creaming, then of course I'm going to need sugar to stabilize the egg foam over here. If I have syrup, what is syrup going to do? Syrup is not going to help me gain structure. Syrup is equally not going to get me to get structure when I'm using the creaming method. So whilst syrup will sweeten, will tenderize, because the properties will end up entrapping moisture, it will limit functioning relatively depending on what you're using. So crystallized sugar will not derive you the same result as soluble, as in syrup sugar. So it's not a one-to-one replacement also, if you know what I mean. So there are how do I say, there are recommendations for substituting, and if you do substitute, it may affect your method. I hope that kind of makes sense, RD. Okay, so RD said, oh, you've never experimented with maple syrup. I've never experimented using maple syrup or honey or agave syrup to sweeten a cake batter. I want to make a wedding cake just for myself. Okay, so here's the question, RD. Sometimes for you to be able to try something new, you have to identify your objective. Is this a dietary need? Is it specific for experimentation? What is the reason for wanting to swap? But I'll get ahead to say swapping crystallized sugar for syrup, whilst the sweetness is still an element you can that is still present, the sweetness is not the same. Because even by comparing the types of sugar based on my sugar collection, we know that sweetness exists on a spectrum. Sweetness is not the same. At the core of what the sweetness level is white sugar, which is rather bland and very what's the word I'm looking for? The word has escaped me. There's no complexity to that sort of sweetness. And it is the same if you swap crystallized sugar for, say, syrup. The sweetness is never the same. I'll tell you what, I baked a muffin and I wanted to harness natural sweetness, so I went for dates, lots of it. I think I went for about 320 grams of dates, and by the time I finished baking the cake, it didn't taste like anything. It didn't seem like there was dates in there anyway. Okay, but apparently dates are supposed to be sweet, isn't it? And then I tried to mix the same recipe using half dates and then half maple syrup. The maple syrup came through a little bit, but not the same. Okay, so does the sweetness of crystallized sugar compare to natural sugars like the honey and other? They are not the same. You will still get a level of sweetness, but not as sweet, because sweetness also has to be defined anyway. Because if you use brown sugar, you're going to get some sweetness, but there's complexity and there is intense flavor options in there somewhere. Does that kind of make sense? So it's not a one-to-one substitution, and the sweetness is never the same. So you're going to have to compromise one thing for the other. But if it meets your objective, then that is completely up to you. Does that make sense? I think as it develops, I might come back and bake with the substitute. I don't think that will answer the question in itself. You know why? Because we know now, if I picked a creaming recipe, a recipe that required sugar and butter to be creamed, I would definitely it will not be a fair start to the experiment by replacing the sugar with a syrup, because we know that I'm not going to get leavening properties from the syrup by so doing. Does that make sense? So most recipes that welcome the use of natural sweetness or substitute sweetening agents actually are optimized for those ingredients. Does that make sense? Okay, so okay, RD answered my question. You wanted an all natural type of cake, vegan and gluten free. I'll tell you, that is what you called Lionsia. I'll answer your question in a minute. Bear with me. But I'm on RD. Okay, you know what? The objective of wanting to bake an all natural type of cake is not impossible. Okay, I think in this day and age, especially in 2025, there are so many people out here with specific dietary needs and specific preferences. And yes, will it be advisable to cut back on sugar? Yes. Okay, so if you have a need to make an all natural sort of cake, by all means. Here's what I will say though, that is what you call specialty baking. So you have to adapt your taste profile and preferences to those, because specialty baking will never match what all round normal sort of baking. I don't know, the word choice here is a little bit off, but follow me. My point is, if you decided to go for a regular standard generic bake, it is easier because ingredients are accessible. You almost have like limitless options of recipes. Does that mean you can't do it the natural way? Oh no, you can definitely do it the natural way, okay? But I will say there are people who have invested their time and resources to developing specific recipes like that for you. And by all means, go try them and see. Unfortunately, because I am not a specialty baker, I couldn't dedicate enough time to answer those questions for you as much as I could. But I'll tell you this. I have tried an all natural muffin before. Does that taste the same as a regular sugar-filled muffin? No. But is it bad? Not at all. Because I baked it using my own milled flour from rolled oats. I replaced the sugar quantity with dates and maple syrup. I think I have the recipe here. I have the recipe somewhere on the channel. Okay, and I baked it and it came out so good. My son loved it. I even mixed it with banana. So if you want to go for an all natural bake, here's some pointers for you. Some recipes will suit better than others. I'll tell you this. You can never go wrong with a chocolate cake. All natural, gluten-free, vegan chocolate cake. It is heavy, but it comes closer to a real chocolate cake with other all-inclusive chocolate cake, right? But trying to get a gluten-free vanilla cake, you're going to have to sacrifice on texture. It's never the same. A vanilla, gluten-free, vegan. So my thing is, don't give up on your quest for the thing you want, but be informed about what limitations are ahead of you so you can maximize your results. I hope that kind of makes sense, RD. But you know, as we are going on, I will be able to kind of like be able to offer you insight, because what I know very well is what I can tell you. What I don't know, look, over here, we don't even pretend we know everything, because how could we? Okay. So what I don't know, I don't know. And I can tell you, I am not so invested in specialty bakes as much as I am with what I have here. But I do have some fair understanding, because sometimes you have to cater for specific preferences. And I occasionally do. Now, Leonzia, yes, I'll tell you, a vegan, because I'll tell you why. Now look at me getting into the woods. Did I come here to tell you I was unwell? Does it feel like I'm unwell? Leonzia, I will answer you in a moment, darling. Just bear with me. I'm just trying to finish with RD here. I'll tell you why a vegan chocolate cake, vegan, gluten-free, natural chocolate cake. First of all, to get a good chocolate cake, you want to intensify flavors, right? A good chocolate cake is not sweet. It is intense. It is moist. It is nice, okay? At least for me, my own chocolate cake that I derived, it's somewhere between a chocolate mud cake and a chocolate sponge, but it's the one bowl method, all-in-one method, if you like. Okay, so I'll tell you why a gluten-free works, a gluten-free chocolate cake, because the oil in gluten-free chocolate cake, you are not looking to optimize the structure of the cake via creaming at all, right? Normally, for most chocolate cakes, at least from what I know, a very good chocolate cake actually welcomes the properties of the all-in-one method, where you have your liquid ingredients and your dry ingredients. When you go for that option, what you're doing is that you are reducing the possibility of your structure relying primarily on sugar for leavening. So without that, then you can make substitutions without affecting the structure of your cake. Plus, a good chocolate cake is just intense. It's lovely. And if you use brown sugar, you are sort of welcoming or enhancing the properties of brown sugar to bring flavor and complexity to your chocolate cake. And for the oil or solid or fat option, you are not limited to solid fat, because what solid fat does in baking when you're creaming is that it actually creates the opportunity for air pockets to be formed. And don't forget, oil or fat plays a huge role in the interference of gluten formation as well. So if you take away the solid fat, you're left with what? Oil, which is a runny sort of fat, if you like. So with that, your options are limitless, because you're only trying to get that to add to the gluten and tenderize the cake, all the other properties that oil and functions that oil brings to cake. So if you go for a gluten-free chocolate cake, you have the option of going for olive oil to bring flavor without the concern, because the difference between olive oil and sunflower oil and butter melted are almost all the same, except olive oil is going to bring you complexity in flavor, especially depending on the type of olive oil you go for. But we know butter is almost superior in terms of flavor. But if you melt the butter, then you can swap that for any sort of running oil already, if you like. And then if you take away the flour and replace it with gluten-free, of course, the gluten stretching and expanding. God, how did I end up in this part of baking? Right? What flour does when it all mixed up and goes in the oven, the thing is that okay, I'll skip that. The thing is that now you've taken the flour away, right? And then you've replaced it with gluten-free, which means that you're not going to get the same stretch and expansion properties from gluten. However, a good chocolate cake doesn't even care about any of that, right? So I say all of that to say, if you ever were looking for an all-natural cake that is close to conventional cake, go for a chocolate cake. You can never go wrong. And your options from coconut oil to olive oil to everything in between, you'll get better results anyway. That is that is just me. Yeah. Artie, we've geeked out on cakes a little bit here. Okay, do you see I'm obsessed with cakes? Now let's go to our friend here. She says, what's the difference between thick cake batter and watery cake batter? Does it affect texture and taste? Oh, yes. Now the difference, that's a complex question for me to answer, but I'll try and summarize the highlights of that question. Of course, the texture, the presentation of batter is going to differ in terms of results. But does that mean if you have a watery batter, you're going to get like a watery type of cake, or a cake that is not like formed well? No, it's not that simple. I guess I will say it depends on what is forming the majority of moisture that is leading to the runny batter. That is where you have to address it. For instance, if you have a runny batter that has a high proportion of eggs, for instance, in a chocolate cake, I don't know, I'm stuck with a chocolate cake, but for good reason, because chocolate cake behaves differently in different contexts and in different recipes. But if I had a chocolate cake that had a high ratio of eggs compared to, say, if I was compared, because ingredients are all about ratios. So if I had a chocolate cake recipe that had a high ratio of eggs in proportion to the amount of chocolate and flour, and yet the batter was runny, what I'm going to derive is a very light textured, moist, yet flavorful chocolate cake, right? But if I had the same recipe that has a high ratio of, say, milk or buttermilk, I am going to get a very gluten-like sort of cake that is more doughy, because the liquid element here in terms of water is coming from the milk, which is very round, because it's what milks, you have milk, the proteins in milk, the fat, and then you have water, and the water in there is going to behave differently in that recipe compared to, say, if I had water from eggs, because that is egg whites that has a large proportion of water, but it's not like you have water. Does that make sense? So yes, the texture of your batter is going to affect your bake, but it's not one for one, and it's not like a black and white thing. It all depends on the recipe, the proportions of recipe fluid and moisture to other ingredients, and how that affects your yield. I hope that kind of makes sense. When you ask me a science-based question, because I am not a scientist, it's hard to kind of explain it to you, but I know what I want to tell you. I'm just not a scientist, but I bake, so there are things I understand. So yeah, so thicker batter doesn't also mean that you're going to end up with a thick, stodgy bake, because depending on the means that you derive your batter, you're going to end up with different consistencies of batter. For instance, if we compare a batter that is derived from creaming the butter and sugar, you're going to get a different result compared to the all-in-one method or the foam method. So yeah, the question of baking and what batter and differences in appearance is all set in context. Yes, Lionsia, go ahead. You have another question for me? Yeah, I'll take another question before we sign off. thank you to all of you who are over here willing me on my obsession. Okay, I love to bake. I'm obsessed. I love cake. Okay, but yeah, right. So Leoncia says, okay, right. Leoncia is asking, what frosting do I recommend that you use? Like, what's my favorite? I think, what's your favorite type of buttercream? Okay, now you are going to get me to talk for a whole hour. Okay, I'll keep it simple. First of all, I'm going to ask you, Leoncia, where are you located? Because the reason why I ask where you're located when you're asking me about buttercream is to determine your climate and how weather affects your conditions, for your baking conditions. Because the buttercream that I may recommend for my preferences within a UK climate where it is largely cold all year through with 3 days of hot summer is going to be different for me to when I recommend the same buttercream for you in somewhere in a hot African climate where you're looking at 32 degrees C heat, like nearly 2/3 of the year. Does that make sense? So where are you located so that thank you. Where are you located so I can make some recommendations for you specifically? However, before I answer the question, I will give you some general guidelines about buttercream. When I hear questions about what's your favorite buttercream, well, I try not to answer it as it should. You know why? Because there is no one buttercream that fits all types of cakes. And I've answered that question in a podcast style video, about 20 minutes of audio, where I talk about the different options. I think we counted about 8. You have the standard 8, which is from American buttercream to the different styles of frostings. And then we have the subcategories of buttercream, where you have the European style buttercream and then everything else in between. After categorizing the 8 form, I think there is about 6 solid forms of buttercream. The rest are derivatives or variations of the standard 6, if you like. Because there's nothing like American buttercream. American buttercream is just butter and sugar mixed together. Besides its sweetness being gritty, it is one of the sturdiest buttercream and is open to being adapted. But depending on what your context is, you might find this sentence very debatable, because what you mean American buttercream is the sturdiest. Yes, it's not known to be sturdy because it has butter as half of the quantity of the buttercream. However, it is one of the buttercreams that is so open to being adapted. You can adapt American buttercream without affecting it in very terrible ways. Whereas other buttercreams are not very open to being adapted without affecting taste and mouthfeel. So in certain contexts, American buttercream might be the best option. Now, if you're a beginner and I recommend Italian buttercream, it's all great and dandy until you get to taking sugar temperature measurements and trying to pour your sugar syrup into your egg white and not knowing what to do, right? But whilst Italian buttercream has been rated the sturdiest amongst all the buttercreams, it is still not my preferred. I don't care for it. Why? Because it's too technical to make. Not that I can't make it. When a customer requests it, I will. But I don't like to make it plus. It has raw eggs. The egg whites, it's like, no. But I will tell you, Italian buttercream is the sturdiest. Do you see what I'm saying? So the question about what is my favorite buttercream is just set in context. Because my favorite buttercream is Swiss Meringue buttercream, but I prefer French buttercream. It is the most unstable buttercream. Why? Why do I like it? Because I don't cover my cakes in buttercream. I use ganache. So I get to choose buttercream just for the purposes of filling into the cakes. So for better taste, mouthfeel, and how creamy French buttercream is, it is my go-to buttercream any day. But for covering cakes, don't try it. It will melt on you. Do you see where I'm going with this one? So context matters to preferences and choices I make about buttercream. Yes, Joker. I love Airman buttercream. I don't like first of all, I don't like the floury, and the texture of it can sometimes look a bit funny, especially when you leave it overnight. Plus, the downside is that you can't refrigerate it. Because when I said you can refrigerate. Sorry, I'll take that back. When you refrigerate it, you have to leave it at room temperature, right? Because if you leave it in a microwave, unlike other buttercreams, which you can kind of warm up in the microwave, if you go and warm Airmine buttercream, it will gelatinize. It will become gluten, and it's no. I don't like it. I like it for all the good reasons. It has great properties, but I don't like it because it's very precious, and the mouthfeel. So you see, one buttercream is not the same for everybody, but I know what you mean because I have tried all those 8 buttercreams, from Russian buttercream, shall we name them? American buttercream, Swiss, Italian, German, Russian, and where are we? We have 5. Italian, the Italian man, okay? And then we have cream cheese, that's one. And then we may have what they call Korean buttercream, but the Korean buttercream is a variation of, say, Italian buttercream. So it's neither here nor there. Okay, so Lyonzia says they want to know what I actually use for buttercream frosting. American is very sugary, so that's why okay, for my buttercream I use Swiss meringue buttercream and French buttercream, but specifically not for covering cakes. I don't cover my cakes in any of those. I cover my cakes in ganache. Okay, so for filling into cakes, I like Swiss and I like French buttercream. If you were going to cover your cakes with buttercream, Swiss meringue would do. I would recommend it highly. French buttercream is not very stable. So to answer your question simply, my recommended buttercream for either filling into cakes or covering cakes will be Swiss buttercream. I hope that kind of makes sense. But I'm not talking full Swiss buttercream, the one that you use pasteurized eggs. That's not my preferred. I actually want to go the longer method of cooking the eggs over the double boiler, whipping it up, whisking, and then doing all the things that I'm required to do to get the result I want. Because actually, I'll tell you this, and I've tried this. I think I've tried it on the platform. I've tried most of the buttercreams. I'll tell you this. The full Swiss buttercream that you see online, people getting the pasteurized egg whites and then whipping it and then adding the butter, it yields a different mouthfeel. Okay? The mouthfeel is completely different to when you actually derive the meringue yourself and then add the butter. So if you're I am very particular about the taste of cakes, the mouthfeel, and my entire preference of a cake. I am very precious about it, but that's because I make cakes and I have the choice to control my outcomes for myself, right? So my preferred buttercream of choice for filling and covering into cakes, even though I would choose ganache over any type of buttercream for covering cakes, will be an original Swiss buttercream made over a double boiler. That is yeah, I hope that kind of makes sense. Yes, you know what, Leonzia, I'll tell you this. Not everybody likes Swiss meringue buttercream, you know. I have had customers in the past, especially those who are used to American buttercream, they do not like Swiss buttercream. I would say try, remember the point where I said no two buttercreams are the same. I would recommend French buttercream, but French buttercream does have like a yellow tone to it. So you can't color it much because it's egg yolk based. You can make it 50-50, but it's very unstable. So yeah, it's hard. Buttercream preferences are very unique. So for instance, if your mom finds Swiss buttercream, she doesn't like it, go for American buttercream, but don't go for a 1-to-2 ratio, because what makes American buttercream too sweet is that you have 1 portion of butter and you have 2 portions of sugar, right? That is going to be too sweet. Go for a 1-to-1 ratio. So you have equal parts of butter to equal parts of sugar, which means it's like the sweetness is not doubled. You have it on a fair scale, if you like, and then add a pinch of salt and a touch of cream to it. See what the outcome is. The salt kind of balances the sweetness a little bit and kind of stabilizes the mouthfeel for you, okay? So it's not like overwhelmingly sweet. Salt does a lot of things, but in buttercream, especially American buttercream, it balances the sweetness a little bit. So I will say, Lionsia, if your mom doesn't like Swiss meringue buttercream, yes, not everybody likes Swiss meringue buttercream, but go for the buttercream she likes and then taper it to her. And you'll find out eventually your mom will like a specific buttercream, but that buttercream is not available for everybody. It's because you made it for her. And sometimes that's the goal of the whole process. Just make a thing for a person, because I think this is how I see cakes. Cakes are like your custom dress, your wedding dress. I don't know why I threw a wedding dress in this conversation, but think of cakes as your custom wedding dress. The thing with cakes is that if we start valuing cakes as something special, then we will begin to tailor our bakes for that person. Fortunately or unfortunately, I fall in a category where I don't bake for everybody. And that sounds like a precious thing to say considering I run a business. But that is not to say people are not important to me. But I know my customer. Most of my customers don't like the general cakes on the market. So each cake is specific to each individual. Now, does that add to cost? Yes, it's super pricey. That's why we're here, isn't it? Okay. But I say that to say, if we start thinking of the people we are serving. So in this case, if you put your mom, this is what you call person-centered care. Like you're thinking about your mom and her preferences. And if you have control, give your mom what she wants. So asking what buttercream is more preferred is like we're tailing to the general population. But if your mom doesn't like the buttercream everybody likes, go to your mom, find out what she prefers, and then tailor it to her. So it might just be a case that she prefers the American buttercream, but it's just because if you're using a 1-to-2 ratio, it is going to be too sweet and it's going to be too overwhelming. What can you do about that? You can reduce it by halving the quantity of sugar, adding a bit of salt, and adding some cream to enhance the mouthfeel. And there you go. You have buttercream that is suited for your mom. And if that doesn't work, perhaps maybe you want to switch from buttercream to frosting completely. Now, am I talking frosting for covering cakes? No. Sometimes it might just be a case of also going for a cake that doesn't require covering. Okay? But that's neither here nor there. But I hope the options and the discussion has kind of opened your mind up to the different possibilities that will help you serve people better. Okay? I know Tapeta is back. Yeah. I know, MB, I know, we all know. American buttercream is like the sort of boyfriend we all dunk on because it is too sweet. I mean, it's cake. I don't like American buttercream, but I won't crap on it. It works because you can add meringue powder to it to stabilize it in the heat. I don't like changing things to my buttercream. It's okay. It's okay, Lionsia. I was giving you some general information on how you can help mom out. But Tapeta, how are you? Lionsia, I was saying, check what your mom likes and then tailor it to her. And perhaps when we finish the live, you can just go back and see what I said over there. It's like detailed information on how to kind of tailor cakes to your mom. And I think, yeah. Tabitha, is that... Tabitha said, there's a time and a place for American buttercream. Yes, yo, look. Can we all show American buttercream some love, okay? American buttercream is still good, okay? Let's be kind. But that said, people, I didn't think I was going to last this long, but we did it. We boxed the brownies. We boxed the brownies. We talked about our pretty cake. Lionsia, is it the first time you're here? Because most of the time we know who is here anyway. Is this your first time? Great. I hope you found some value over here though. Thank you. Where are you joining us from? Are you in the UK, US? Which part of the world are you joining us from? We are just nosy like that. We just like to know where you're joining us from. That's all. If you don't mind sharing, by the way. But you're obsessed with cakes, my dear. It's an Iraq. Oh, okay. Great to have you. You're obsessed with cakes. It's an expensive obsession to have, you know. Yesterday, I went to my local shop, right? Leoncia, you're in Iraq, right? You don't have to say it's the worst country. You're there. What can you do about it? Okay? I don't know what your experience is, but don't say it's worse for our benefit, because we don't know what condition you're living in, right? But as long as you're safe and you feel okay, let's look up and hope for better, okay? Because I'm sure there are people in the UK who actually think being here is worse too. Not me. Not me. I think it doesn't matter where I am. It's going to be all right. Okay? That's just a little bit of encouragement. Just to say, I know sometimes it can feel awful when you feel like the whole world is judging you. Because I know when you hear Iraq, most people don't have, it doesn't register kindly to people. But I don't even know how to find an air ticket and get to Iraq. Well, I don't know, people. I just said, yeah, yep. So, Liosia is saying, well, people get obsessed with plastic surgery and we're just obsessed. I mean, the cost of plastic surgery and the cost of cake is like comparing apples and bananas. They're two different things, okay? So I'll be obsessed with cake anyway. I have cake. Look at all this nonsense here. I have a whole sugar collection. I think I want to build a cake museum. Am I crazy? Am I crazy? Okay, people. I want to be obsessed with cakes any day. I want to be obsessed with cakes any day because I cannot afford plastic surgery. But then again, here's the tangent I was going on. I'm like, I went to my local shop yesterday, okay? And guess what? Here's the fun part. I actually went into the shop to pick up washing up liquids. Well, never mind. My shopping bill for the house was about £27. And that wasn't for the washing up liquid, okay? That was to do with some random shit that I wasn't even thinking of buying. But anyway, you know how it goes. You go into the shop and then you end up buying things that you didn't budget for. And then you're like, oh, hey, oh, I need this. The worst part though was the baking ingredients that I hadn't budgeted for. And by the time I was done, the burger cost me 52 quid. And I was like, whose items are those? And who is paying that 52 quid? Well, sadly, I did end up paying. But all I'm saying is that baking is expensive. Not compared to the plastic surgery's office though. I can't even afford a consultation to get a quote for that nonsense. So let's see. Leonzia said, okay, let's see. Leonzia says it's worse than others because the brands are very bad. Like an example of like it's really hard to get high quality vanilla or butter or any type of things. You know what? I think I've also come to the understanding that baking results differ depending on ingredients, and ingredients accessibility differ depending on location. So that will always matter. But if you're obsessed with cakes, I am sure you will always find a way, because you will tinker with things, you will change things around, you will break the rules, and you will find the answers you need. And whilst that is expensive, I hope you still find joy in trying to get to the results that you need, Lionzia. Okay? That's the encouragement I'll give you. Tapeta, I am going to give you a written warning. You were late for work today. No, honey, I'm kidding. I did ask after you, and we thought you were sleeping. So we thought we'll let you sleep through. So great to have you back. My people, let's end this obsession for today. Because it's Thursday tomorrow, isn't it? It's Thursday tomorrow. We'll be back with another session of bake obsession and sugar and all things baking. And yeah, I will upload the brownie recipe online. I will put it in the community post. Check back over the weekend and go catch up on the functions of sugar that is up on the channel. And yeah, I'll see you in my next video. Thank you, Lollipop and Tapita. Thanks for the help today, and I'll see you soon.